don't you worry. As a 80 tripping person, you know that we can always use telepathy.
That's right. You and I have both taken LSD enough times to be able to have a completely nonverbal interview today. Welcome to Discograffiti, the podcast that gives Gen X music maniacs a chance to smell like teen spirit again by connecting with a brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebro, and with 3 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. And in this episode of Discograffiti, we'll be turning our spray cans on Os Mutantes with very special guest Sergio Dias, the main man behind the wheel of the aforementioned incredible band. And stay tuned for part 2 next week, where he does a Discograffiti deep dive on that insanely great Os Mutantes debut album. In the next hour, we'll learn about which song on Os Mutantes' debut was actually Sergio's very first composition ever, the origin of the Tropicalia movement and his part in it, and the real truth behind feeding guitars through honest-to-goodness sewing machines. Okay, first things first, you need to know just how seriously I take this craziness. Discograffiti is heavily researched, and the music is always reassessed with fresh ears. We don't just cover albums. We do a searingly honest deep dive analysis of all EPs, singles, comp tracks, relevant solo work, and sometimes bootlegs and live stuff. Every release is slapped with an objectively accurate star rating between 0 and 5, which allows us all, the real reason we do this, the Tootsie Pop reward at the center of the rock and roll lolly, to come face to face with the true shape of an artist's overall arc. Be sure to follow along with us chronologically as we go. The link to our legendary playlist is right there in the show notes. Coming up, we've got part 2 of Sergio Dias and jaw-dropping multi-parters with David Pajo and John Landis, not to mention an impending 13-hour interview with 2 founding members of the association. Whew! So don't miss out. Open up your listening app right now and click follow. And get ready to meet your new friends. They're all kicking it right now in our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the show, but there's a hell of a lot more. You get recaps of the day in music history, great artist and track recommendations, polls that put you in the driver's seat on guest and show topic decisions, access to a thriving creative hub if you're looking for your next collaboration, and much more. So make sure you don't miss out. You can find the link to the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound Facebook page right there in the show notes. And away we go then with Sergio Dias from Os Mutantes. Psychedelicized political revolutionaries waving the Brazilian free-living flag turned acid-fried Prague progenitors who so very, very desperately just needed 28 years away to make sense of it all. This morning's guest, because it's 5 o'clock in the damn morning here at the moment, is a 2-time Latin Grammy nominee, best known for his work with the band Os Mutantes. If I was a lady, I would definitely consider giving this guy my hand in marriage, seeing as he has been the only consistent member of the band since the beginning, so he obviously has no problem with commitments, having appeared on every album since its formation. And thank the good Lord God up above for that. And that's because this man is objectively and inarguably a true psychedelic guru and one of the most impressive synthesists of all the various amazingly interesting strains of music that were in the air back in ye old days of the 1960s. Lads and ladies out in Discograffitiville, a toast, please, of the highest order and with the absolute highest of honors to the high-living, hard-driving mastermind, the man behind the crazed tales of madness and depthless invention and reinvention, not to mention guitars fed through motherfucking sewing machines, for crying out loud, because it just doesn't get any more psychedelic than that. And that's because, simply put, it was an idea sprung from the fecund brainstem of Os Mutantes, Sergio Dias.
Hi, David.
Hello,
Hi,
sir.
guys. So honored to be here.
The honor is all mine, truly.
Wow. I just woke up and I accept your hand.
I'm on both knees right now, not even one. You deserve both knees. So let me ask you, because you probably have different types of reactions from, people who are just doing their job interviewing you, to other people whose mouths drop open when they see that you're actually a human being.
I mean, the fan stuff is very, I am very honored to be, so much revered and so much loved and understood, by all this, especially the new generation, which is an amazing thing. And I can only humbly say thank you.
Look, after everything that you have been through, all the bands that we cover here, the thing I'm most interested in is, at the end of this great big journey that artists and bands take together, the artist winds up leaving a big chunk of themselves behind in the effort to get all this work recorded for posterity. There's been a lot left behind with you guys, from the political to the personal to the psychological and emotional. There's been a lot of breadcrumbs left behind in the trail of the Os Mutantes story. Just to ground it a little bit and give you some background as far as my fandom goes, what you guys mean to me, when that Tropicalista box set came out, with Gilberto Gil, Caetano Veloso, Gal Costa compilation record from 1968. And with you guys, I bought that when it came out. So I can't remember what year that was. It's been about, I'm guessing, 25 years of me knowing who you guys are. It blew me away. I loved everything on that box. And then, just to kind of broaden the scope out a little bit, at the time I was living in New Jersey, I would go into New York and go to Kim's Underground, the record store. And at the time, Luwaka Bop and David Byrne had done this wonderful thing, one of the first things to wake you from what you have called the big sleep, right?
Yes.
So you guys
Not really. Wasn't really sleep. It was a deep dream.
Right.
Because I was in New York for 10 years and I was playing with the best musicians in the world, and I was like, nobody ever threw me away from the stage.
Right.
So I guess I did something good.
Well, so during that time, I would always go to the and by the way, do me a favor, just correct me. I'm going to be butchering your language, and I'm going to apologize in advance for that. But I don't speak Portuguese, so please constantly correct me.
Don't you worry. As a 80 tripping person, you know that we can always use telepathy.
That's right. We will. You and I have both taken LSD enough times to be able to have a completely nonverbal interview today.
We used to say that we were going to pay like for one ticket in the movies, and the rest will be sitting down on the curb and watching the movie together.
So as I'm browsing through the shelving of Kim's Underground, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, David Byrne and Luwaka Bop have done this great job in releasing the records that you guys put out in the couple years that you were around in the 60s. In other words, in my mind, this is what I'm thinking. But I'm browsing through and I'm looking at all these album covers of albums I've never heard of, where you guys had, swung into a more progressive direction. And the price tags on these records, because they're all imports, I'm actually looking at CDs, they're like $30, $40. A lot of your career that at least where I was sitting, seemed to have been written out of the story.
Well, for example, when Rita left the band, we wrote A to Z.
A to Z, one of the greatest albums you guys have ever made. I listened to it again this morning when I woke up, which was, by the way, at 2 a.m. It's just brilliant. It's a brilliant record. And not only was that kind of written out of things, but it wasn't even released at the time. We're going to get to it. Look, in stark contrast to the way your mind works and my mind works, we're going to go slavishly chronologically.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so let's introduce the characters in today's episode. We have Sergio Dias, am I pronouncing your name correctly, hopefully?
Yes.
Arnaldo Baptista, your brother.
Yes.
Rita Lee, that's the easiest name to pronounce.
Yeah.
And then Claudio Cesar Dias Baptista.
Claudio Cesar Dias Baptista.
Okay, so that's to begin with. Of course, we'll bring in Laminia and Dino Lemme.
Dino Lemme.
Okay, Dino Lemme. So let's first start with a little section I like to call the run-up, which as quickly as possible, I want to get from when you guys started to when you released your first record. So I'm going to just talk quickly, okay?
Okay.
And just stop me rudely if I get anything wrong. Just say, nope. All right?
Okay.
Os Mutantes was formed in Sao Paulo in 1966 by yourself and your brother, Arnaldo.
I'm not sure about the date. I just bought a watch for me in 1980. So I'm kind of lost in time. If you say so, I believe you. But I mean, I think this entire trip started with my mother. My mother is the first woman in the world to write a concerto for piano and orchestra. She has 2. And you know about Liszt, you know about Beethoven, you know about Chopin, but you don't know any girl, any woman who did this task. So she was like the best pianist I ever heard in my life. And I'm not being like a Jewish mother, to my mother.
Are you Jewish?
No.
Okay.
I don't know. I think we all are, right?
I think so, yeah, in a certain way.
Uh-huh.
Your dad was a poet.
Yes.
So did your mom and dad collaborate? Because you have a perfect union of words and music.
Well, my father helped us in just a couple of songs. For example, I believe he did help us on Tempo no Tempo because of all the onomatopoeic work, and a little bit on the Don Quixote.
From the second record.
Yes. My mother played on my first composition, which is Senor F.
That's a pretty good first composition, my friend.
Thank you, man.
Very impressive. So you guys, again, correct me if I'm off base here. In my research, I found out that you initially had an all-male band called the Wooden Faces.
Yeah, the Wooden Face, I wasn't part of it. At that time, I was part of my band called Forever, because we played Beatles. For when I first heard I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You, I cut my hair immediately. So I became a Beatle. So I have a friend, which is a fantastic singer. His name is Reginaldo Agulha. And so we together did this band, and we were playing all over the place, like from colleges and everywhere, to a bar in the corner, whatever.
Yeah. At this point, are you political at all or no? Do you feel like you got pulled into the political fray because of time and place, or did you come into it political?
No, for example, Kennedy died when I was 12, and I think that was the first coup d'etat. And then in 1964, I was 13, and we had the coup d'etat in Brazil. My father was also worked as a right arm of one of the biggest politicians in Brazil. So he was arrested. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody knew where he was. And so for me, it was very hard because I couldn't understand anything. You know, why the hell would they arrest my father? I remember that the politician was very well connected to the Air Force. And they were planning to invade the barracks, or how you call that, the fort or whatever, of where my father was held, and do an operation and take him out of there. Finally, they released my father after almost 30 days. He was diabetic, so it was not very healthy for him.
Was he a type 2 or type 1?
The worst one.
I'm that too.
Well, he died blind.
Oh, so yeah, he didn't have control.
Yeah. So anyway, all of this, it's a very warm feeling in my heart, you know, because the love that I had for them, you know, for example, my father, he used to go to work like 6 a.m. every day. And we were rehearsing like up to 4 a.m. He never complained. He never said, stop. When I was 13, I told my mother, who I used to go to see in the municipal theater, and she would return to center stage like 10 times. And how you call that? Standing ovation. When I was 13, I told my mother that I was going to leave school because I was a professional. So she turned to me and said, oh, you're a professional, so now you earn your own money. And of course, she didn't kick me out of the house or anything like that, but she put me into the test. In 6 months, I was making the same amount of money she would give me in an allowance that she used to give me.
Nice.
Because I started to give classes. Because the way I learned guitar, there was no guitars, there was no strings, there was no picks, there was nothing. So I had an acoustic guitar, very awful one, but fantastic, beautiful. I thought it was beautiful. It was blue with pom-poms on the strings, you know, colored. So it was so pretty.
When did the golden guitar come into play? How many years?
Ooh, much further down.
Just for anyone out there who doesn't know what I'm talking about, the golden guitar, Guitarra de Oro, was created by yourself and your brother, Claudio, and that we'll definitely get back to, because I have all kinds of questions about your brother.
Okay. Well, anyway, that was when I was 13. At 16, I was on stage with Gilberto Gil playing Domingo no Parque.
Okay, before you go any further, because that gets us into phase one. So before we get there, I just want to ask you a few things. Your work was debuted as a trio when you guys were on O Pequeño Mundo de Ranivan?
Yes. Well, before that, we were playing on TV Bandeirantes, and we were like hired guns. There was like 2 shows there, one called Quadrado e Redondo, which was a kind of shindig, and there was like the hit parade. So whenever you had to play like, let's say, a Beatles song, we will come in and sing and play. And we were a trio then. The reason why we went a trio is because our lead singer, Sueli, she left to live in America, because before we were the Six-Sided Rockers. And it was me, Arnaldo, Rafael, which is the main energy, main power behind all of this. He's a genius guy.
And so, Rita was coming from the Teenage Singers, correct?
Well, both of them, Rita and Sueli. Sueli left because she went to live in America, and we were lost without her, because she was the main voice. Right. So Rafael found another girl, but the girl didn't really cut through. And so there was a dissension in the band. I didn't even knew about it. And Arnaldo came and said, "Oh, we left the band, blah, 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 blah." So I said, "Okay, I'll leave with you." And so that's how Mutantes was created. So after that, we started to perform, in whatever we could. And then we started to play in TV Bandeirantes. My brother Arnaldo used to read and make a collection of the series called Argonauts from Portugal, which all the best top science fiction guys came. Like, for example, Ray Bradbury.
Sure.
So there was this book, which is called A Cadeia das Sete, which is the chain of the seven, or Planet of Os Mutantes. So that's where the name came from. Okay. And the book was by Stephen Wu.
You guys are bouncing around doing TV shows. Then you were able to meet Gilberto Gil, who brought you guys into the circle of the Tropicalia movement.
Well, actually, there was no Tropicalia movement. We created all this.
Okay. So it's you guys, or that was something that was a boulder that was already going downhill?
Sorry?
In other words, was this something that Caetano and Gilberto and Gal were already ensconced in, or did you guys come on board and together?
The Tropicalism was, I think, the reply to, or the answer to your Flower Power. It was around the same era. It was not only Gil and Caetano. There was like people on cinema, people on theater. There was a big movement against the coup d'etat.
And you say that it's an answer to Flower Power, but from my point of view, and I was born in 1972. I didn't live through it, but when I look back at all that stuff, there's a lot of American musicians who, they were hippies. They were not active. They were not activists. Yeah. They had a lot of, poetic insight into it, but you guys were living it because.
Well, we were living it because, we were, many times people would say, "Don't leave the hotel because the militaries are going to pick you up." And that was not very healthy.
Do you think the Tropicalista aspect of your story has been overemphasized? And the reason I'm asking you that is because from everything I can see, the first two records are Tropicalia inspired, but most of your career is not Tropicalia, it's Os Mutantes, right?
Os Mutantes are basically the cornerstone of Tropicalism. Because without the guitars, the effects, and our knowledge and our musical background, which was very deep, I don't think it would have been so much of a melange as the Tropicalism was. We met Gil in a recording for his girlfriend and Nana Caymmi. And so that's how he started. There was nothing, there was, Gil was, for example, going out with Elis Regina in a crusade against guitar, for you to imagine. When we met, he came to my house and I thought, oh, damn, another old samba or old school stuff. But he was very fresh.
Just so people who aren't familiar with what was happening at that time, there was a music that was pretty much the norm out in Brazil called MPB. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And it was basically samba, and it was very stringently samba. And then you guys come along, you got the Beatles, Hendrix, Sly and the Family Stone, Bossa Nova, samba. You've got this, it sounds like, you can't even keep a lid on the stew that you're cooking.
Yeah. Also, we had the luck of having our George Martin, which was Rogério Duprat.
I would love to talk further about him because A Banda Tropicalista do Duprat is just as essential a record as Gilberto Gil, Caetano Veloso, Tropicalia, O Panis et Circenses. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Panis et Circenses.
Yes. Okay, good.
Let me try to remember this. When we met Gil, he showed the song, and I said, wow, this ain't no old stuff, old school. Because, there was also, besides the samba or the MPB, there was the entire bossa nova movement, which was like outrageously avant-garde.
Mm-hmm.
And Gil had all this. He was basically one of the composers for Elis Regina, and he's a genius, really a genius. And Caetano is also. So we were lucky to form the CERN of the Tropicalism movement, which was us with our knowledge and know-how and classical music and jazz and all this, and Caetano and Gil that were pretty much traditionally to the northeast of Brazil. That conjunction, I would say, with Rogério Duprat became a new style, a new form of art. And that's how the Tropicalism was created. There was not even a name. I mean, who gave the name, I think, was Chacrinha, was a TV guy. He was amazingly crazy. He used like to throw codfish to the audience and bananas and all the stuff. He was amazing, a fantastic genius. And I mean, if you think about how straight Ed Sullivan was comparing to Chacrinha, my God, that's Brazil,
At this point, did you feel the specter of the government looming over you? Were they making clear threats to you to not incite the
Well, not yet. In the festival, the first festival that we played with Gil, we got the second place. At the time, there was the people from the left and the people who they say was the right. I was nothing. I was a kid and I was an anarchist.
Right.
I thought I would never die, and I thought I would be like eternal. And so
it turns out you were right.
But I mean, the idea of politics, we were aware of it a lot because my father was the right arm of Ademar de Barros, which was a huge politician in São Paulo, Brazil. So we knew about it, but we didn't know that much. Of course, Caetano and Gil were much more into it than we were.
When things swung back in the other direction, and Gilberto and Caetano especially were exiled.
Yes.
You guys were, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys were not exiled. Is that correct or no?
No, not exiled, but we were threatened several times. The way that we fought back was, for example, there was that I mean, we were kids, so we thought we were indestructible. So we would like...
And it turns out you were right.
Yeah, kind of. Well, we would kick back whatever they did. For example, A Hora Vez o Cabelo Nascer, which is a song, they censored us. So we couldn't say yellow and green because it was the color of our flag.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of changing the words, we mutilated them. We put a noise on it. So when there was like, o meu cabelo é verde amarelo, in the verde amarelo, you would put like a
right
on top of it. And then we will go out and we will perform with the original lyrics. It's amazing how many stuff happened in 2 years.
In 1966, you guys are doing some TV shows. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, just from my perspective, you're on 5 albums in 1968. You're probably on more than 5. You know, I mean, with your relationship to time and space and, you know, the easing of the fabric of that kind of stuff because of the
Yes, that's exactly why I tell you, we were the cornerstone of that movement, because we had
you're the house band of the whole movement. So in 68,
yes.
These records, Gilberto Gil, Caetano Veloso, Tropicalia, o Panis e Circenses, a banda tropicalista do Duprat, and of course, your self-titled debut record. That's 5 albums in 68. And not only 5 albums, but they're masterworks. I mean,
I thank you very, very much. I mean, to put this in perspective, because every time somebody asks, so when did you play that Panis et Circenses? And I said, well, I think it was 68. And then when you guys released the first album, I said, well, I think it was 68, you know, and I didn't realize until now how deep was our influence in the entire movement and how proliferous we were.
I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've listened to not just your debut record, but all those records. Duprat's album alone is astounding, and it's probably the least significant one on that list.
Well, for me, it was a very special one because it was the first time I did a solo.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, well, I sang The Rain, the Park, and everything, I think.
Love that. Yeah, love it.
And it was good. It was cool. It was cool to be somehow free, you know, and do whatever I wanted.
I want to fast forward here to when David Byrne comes knocking on your door, because I just want to ask, obviously David Byrne went a great way towards getting your work back in the public eye, which obviously worked. But do you feel like there was, in retrospect, too much of an emphasis placed on your early non-prog psych-based work and less of an emphasis placed on some of those 70s records? Hey lads and ladies, Dave Gebrow here. I abandoned my career and moved my family 3,000 miles to be able to focus exclusively on Discograffiti. And so if you're like me and enough is just never enough, then please visit patreon.com/Discograffiti and become one of our Patreon soldiers of sound. Discograffiti is an entirely listener-supported show, and it's also intended to be a 3 times a week music deep dive experience. So do us both a favor and consider giving it a shot. Trust me, I'm working hard for the money, so hard for it, honey. There's the main show on Friday, a Monday wildcard episode, which is either a soul-bearing interview with that week's special guest or an offshoot show like Queasy Listening and Rock Cousteau. And then on Wednesdays, there's the humdinger of them all, Discograffiti's The Private Press with Paul Major. You got nothing to lose. If you don't dig it after a month, you're refunded, no questions asked. Once again, that's patreon.com/Discograffiti.
I met David in the first gig that he did on CBGB's. We had a cool friend, Vera Beato, and she took me there. And I met him and we were talking about music and stuff, but then we lost contact. And then he called me at my house. I don't know how he got my phone, and said about the Everything is Possible idea. And so I gave him the list of the songs because they were the ugly ducks, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And they were the most weirdest and the most, I would say, more artistically representative of Os Mutantes, besides, of course, Minha Menina or Bat Macumba or something like that. But, for example, Dia 36, that was my first lyrics.
I think the reason I'm asking about David is because, you know, when I look at your first record, there's very little of you guys writing on it. And by the second record, you guys are now writing. So
Yes.
I'm wondering if, everyone holds up that debut record, and rightly so, as, an incredible masterwork that's representative of what you guys do. Do you feel that it's not because it was a whole bunch of people writing for you guys, and that you came into your own later on your less famous works? I'm wondering if there's a feeling underneath it all, like, wow,
No.
I'm really, really thankful for all the adulation, but I wish people would recognize us for the songs that we wrote.
No. We had no egos, no
Okay.
feeling or thought in this level.
Okay.
I mean, that was the way that life manifests, because we were writers also. So we started writing, and of course, therefore, we exist.
Right,
So we wanted to, of course, record our songs. For example, in the first album, Senhor F is my first song, and that was our composition. I mean, it was Rita and I now did the lyrics, I did the song.
Let's just say we're in phase one now. Okay, so I like to break a band's career up in phases. I'm just going to call phase one, Everything is Possible, 1966 to 1972. And before we get into the actual releases, a couple of things I want to ask is, do you feel like LSD has been overemphasized in your story? Or
Totally.
Really? So it wasn't as essential a component as it's
Not at all.
Okay.
We were kids, and for example, Caetano and Gil, they would not smoke joints in front of us
because of your age.
Because of our age. I mean, for them, there were situations that I was having to play behind the stage because I was too young,
right.
And the gig would be like at midnight. We were never introduced to any of this until the 70s. So all of the work that people praises so much in terms of being psychedelic, there was no drugs involved.
Well, the true meaning of the word psychedelic is mind expanding. I think what's so groundingly psychedelic about your debut record is that the stew of influences is not tempered. It's an explosive parade, celebration of possibility.
I think it's basically, I mean, the 60s, from 66 to 70 or whatever. If you think, for example, what was happening in the world, and without internet, without anything, for example, we used to listen to a shortwave radio to listen to the BBC and get the songs. If you think, for example, the Monterey Festival, everybody says, oh, Woodstock. Wait a minute. What happened in the Monterey? We had Mamas and Papas who created the thing. And then we were awarded with Jimi Hendrix just by himself. He would have changed the entire spectrum of music in the world. But no, there was not only him. There was Janis Joplin in the same festival. And she blew everybody's minds. And then after that, you have Ravi Shankar killing and destroying every concept of music that we would have in the Western world. We had no idea that that kind of music existed. And all of this in one festival. So you imagine the vortex that was happening in the world.
You used the components of all the acts in that festival because, Joplin, I could point to My Refrigerator Doesn't Work.
Yeah.
The Association, who played that festival, I could point to any number of songs that you've made. I could point to any of the acts there and describe how you utilized and, more importantly, synthesized those influences.
For us, basically, there was no labels. We were basically doing rock and roll.
Yeah.
That's all. I mean, if you think Gentle Giant as a rock band, but that's what it was.
Yeah.
Or Emerson, Lake and Palmer was rock and roll.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the idea of progressive came a little bit pejorative because of the use of synthesizers and the classical input from Rick Wakeman and all this stuff.
Yeah, but there was, you have to agree that there's, as much as I love Prague, but there is a pomposity that is a detractor for some people because,
Yeah, but I think the pomposity was more in relation to Yes, and because if you think of King Crimson,
Tales from Topographic Oceans is founded on bloat. It's just pure bloat.
what is this? I'm sorry.
Bloat is when I sit down and I eat food for 3 hours.
Oh,
And,
yeah, I hear you.
yeah. And I feel like I'm going to explode.
Well, I think there was so many situations that were being. Remember, Tropicalism started with mixing of Brazilian music and rock and roll,
Yeah.
right? But then, for example, if you think about Frank Zappa, what the hell was that? He was breaking all the barriers, and Hendrix. I mean, was Hendrix psychedelic or was he
Tremendously psychedelic?
I know, but he created the thing, I mean, the Beatles, if you think like Tomorrow Never Knows, what the hell is that?
Well, let's talk about your secret weapon because, yes, you had your George Martin in Rogerio Duprat, but you had a secret weapon that they did not have. Your brother Claudio, that was the thing that drew me in. So I had no idea who you guys were. I was in my 20s and I heard about, this insane genius who hooked up guitars to sewing machines. And I just was like, I need to know more, and actually never really found out more. I just discovered your music, became a big fan. Please tell me about how your Claudio is. Yeah, Claudio. What's the deal with Claudio?
Well, Claudio is a genius, period. Like autodidact.
Yeah.
Self-thought.
Right.
He wasn't very musical, but he was like, he was the most brilliant person that I met. For example, until today, I never had a question for him that he wouldn't answer it into the deepest level. He's amazing.
Was he formally asked to start building equipment and things for the band? How did that happen?
Because he had like the wooden faces, and he was playing with them. And he hated the sound of the instruments. So he started to build. The first guitar that he built was made of a lid of a toilet seat.
Mm-hmm.
And he used glass in the front, so it was transparent. He was like amazing.
Did he take engineering classes? Did he have a background?
No,
nothing. Like truly an autodidact.
Truly autodidact.
Yeah. So the sewing machine thing, is that what I'm hearing on Bat Macumba?
Yes.
Okay.
So, but before, let me make you understand why this thing happened. Claudio and I had a relationship that was very close. And for example, when Mutantes became like a trio, I was handled the task of harmonies, of textures, solos, singing, all of this. Arnaldo was basically playing bass and singing. So I had to deal with sounds and textures and all this. And I couldn't, for example, go down on my knees to change some sound in a pedal because I was at the same time singing.
Right.
So Claudio came with the idea of, okay, so let's put all the knobs and all the stuff inside the guitar. And that's what he did. And that was done first in a Italian jazz guitar body, which was called a barrera. That was the first time that I could reach for the the knobs and everything.
Is he doing things with the band? Is he working with you the entire?
Yeah, we all live together.
But I mean, is he a part of the whole thing until
Oh yes.
1978? Is he
Well,
currently working with you?
he started to build guitars and sell it. But for example, the pristine things. For example, I had a problem. There was no time to change from an electric guitar to an acoustic guitar and sing at the same time. So I tell him, what do I do? And he immediately got a cartridge of a turntable, and he touched the bridge with the needle, and immediately we had this sound of acoustic. So this was done like 30 years before Ovation.
Is he putting in insane amounts of work into each?
Yes.
And then it's only you. Here's what I mean. It's like, so in Bat Macumba, you have this sound that is really, new. I mean, entirely new. I don't hear the sewing machine thing on.
Well, let me tell you how did it work.
Okay.
This is entire Claudio, all his idea. You know a potentiometer? You know the knob that you have for volume in your car or in your stereo device in your house?
Sure.
Okay, you start to 0, there's a stop there. And then you go up to 10, and there's another stop there. What my brother did, he took the thing that would stop the potentiometer, and he would turn 360 degrees. So with this, he used the motor and the pedal of a sewing machine to make pickups. So he created a gadget that would fix the potentiometer to the engine of the sewing machine. And we would control the speed with the pedal of the sewing machine.
So before he's doing this, what was your brother on track to do? Because he's obviously an insanely intelligent person. What was he wanting to do with his life before all this?
Honestly, we were all together. We were a team. We were doing everything together. For example, that thing that I told you of the acoustic guitar sound was also connected with the change of a wah-wah into a wah-wah. Yeah, because, for example, if you listen to the sounds of Ave Lucifer, there's that whoosh, whoosh,
whoosh. Very disconcerting. What is that?
I'll give you $1,000 if you find out.
Yeah, I'll never get there. But
basically, the guitar was stereo. He placed a piezo electric pickup under the bridge, went direct to one output, and the other guitar went directly to, for example, my wah-wah. But he changed the components inside the wah-wah so it would go like whoa, whoa. And this, together with the bright sound of the acoustic, made that sound.
Okay.
And it's like sometimes it sounds like a throwing up.
Yeah, it does. It reminds me, and I don't get seasick, but it reminds me of what I would know if I was seasick. Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, and to use these things was a huge privilege for me because I was very creative with these things because we basically worked together. No, I needed something and he would do it. For example, on the Regulus, on the Golden Guitar, I'm sorry, I'm going to introduce this there. I wanted a distortion that wouldn't intermodulate. The transistors at the time, they distorted on the fifth harmonic. So if you played like a chord, it would intermodulate because of the fifth harmonic. It would sound like you wouldn't hear the chord. So I told him, I want a distortion that I could play and listen to the entire chord. He said, well, the only way we can do that is to separate the pickups like in 6 individual pickups and 6 individual distortions. And so we did it.
Is his job still building things for Os Mutantes?
No, it came to a point, I think especially because I was in America, and then I came back to Brazil in around 90 to 2000. And I mean, the music wasn't as great as it was before.
You mean music in general, or you guys?
Yeah, in general.
Okay.
In general, because, of the record companies and all this, and then CDs and piracy and all this basically destroyed the entire structure of the music business. So he started to write, because my father was a poet and a writer also. He wrote this huge saga, which is called Gea, and nobody knows enough about it. So it is a kind of masterpiece of writing. It's something that you have to read to understand. Mm-hmm. And it has a lot to do with our story. So that's how he became this new persona that he is. And he's basically just trying to show this job, to the people. And so he uses like internet and all this. But I think he should translate that to English and then it's kind of a Tolkien thing. It's too good. So I would love to see that thing in a movie, or that thing it's kind of a Dune meets Lord of the Rings and Star Wars or whatever. It's like an amazing thing.
There's no pressure on the boys in your family to produce greatness because your parents were both artists. Was there, or?
No. I mean, there never was any pressure to do anything. I mean, when I said to my mother that I was going to leave the school, can you imagine this in 1962? A kid come to his mother and say, "Listen, I'm leaving school because I'm a professional."
Yeah,
that's absurd.
I did the same douchey thing to my poor parents.
But instead of punishing me, or obligating me to go to the school, no, she went along because she understood what was music and the how deep could it go besides just the guitar. You have no idea, Poor Liszt. I think there's some recordings of her that my brother did, or some other people did. Very few things. Her concerto is in my brother's website, and it is like absurd to hear her play. Anyway, what can I help you now?
Well, okay, it's funny. We've been talking for an hour, 15 minutes, and we haven't talked about a single song. And that's by design. Yes. But now we're going to be talking about an unending flurry of great creative works, starting with 1968's self-titled debut, Os Mutantes. All right, that about does it. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to our graphic designer, Todd Zimmer, my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, Sergio Dias, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the soldiers of sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you. But wait a minute. This is just the entrance to the rabbit hole. No need to stop now, because we're on a roll. Join us as we descend down, down, down on this April Fool's Week deep dive. Another way to dive even deeper into playful, sophisticated psych is to get thee directly to either Lou Barlow Rates the Zombies, episodes 59 and 60, Bee Gees Part 1, episode 10, or a recent Private Press episode about the incredible band Fane Jade. Of course, if you're subscribing to our Patreon, then you already know to keep your ears peeled throughout the week, because this Monday continues the April Fool's Week deep dive with our Patreon-only wildcard episode, Napoleon XIV, his entire catalog rated, in which we learn about his unreleased 1968 second LP, Oh My God, Stop the Feces, I Swear to Christ. Not to mention Wednesday's incredible Patreon-only episode of Discograffiti's The Private Press with Paul Major, wherein we'll be covering Bob Larson Speaks Out on Rock Music, in which a real preacher gives the kids a taste of fuzz guitars to turn them off of fuzz guitars. That's patreon.com/Discograffiti. This is an entirely listener-supported show, and I offer a full, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. So if you dug this episode, you don't have an excuse. Check it out right this second. Thank you so much in advance. And be sure to mark your calendars, because next Friday, April 7th, we're coming at you with part 2 of the interview with the great Sergio Dias from the even greater Os Mutantes. And so, from now till then, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti.